Great. I was just about to check that you'd done that, Hannah. So welcome everybody. I'm Alice and I'm a service coordinator for IRUS and JUSP. So I work on user engagement a lot and helping to support all of you. I'll pass over to my colleague Hannah to introduce herself as well, sort of go around our team before we get started.
So hi everyone, I'm Hannah Reedy, same role as Alice, working as a service coordinator on IRUS and JUSP. So mine's the name you probably see on your emails and your help desk queries along with Alice. So yeah, supporting you and helping you using IRUS and JUSP. So I'll pass over to Laura.
Morning everyone, so my name is Laura Wong. I am the product manager for IRUS and of course JUSP, and we're available at the end to answer any questions you have about the service. And I'll hand over to Dave if you're available.
I am, yeah. I'm hiding in the dark because it's far too sunny here. I'm Dave Chaplin. I basically do the grunt on on IRUS. That's what we're talking about today, isn't it? Yeah, and get all that lovely data of yours into sensible statistics.
Excellent, thanks Dave. So just as a reminder, this webinar is going to walk you through the reports and showing you how they can be used and what they'll show you and how to get the most benefit from them. So we're going to cover which reports are available and how to use them, what do usage statistics demonstrate to an institution, and the benefits of using IRUS. So just as an overview, for anyone who's new to their roles or new to IRUS, IRUS stands for Institutional Repository Usage Statistics, and the service enables you to share and compare information about usage of items within your institutional and data repositories. So how does it work? So it collects raw usage data for your repository and processes these into counter-conformant usage statistics. This is providing you with comparable, authoritative, standards-based usage data. The stats are openly available through our website, and as a participant, you also have access via the API and widget, which we'll come on to a bit later. So who is using IRUS at the minute? So across the UK, we have 154 institutions using IRUS with 193 repositories collecting stats, both publications and data repositories. There are 11 different repository platforms using IRUS, with most of these being DSpace, ePrint, Figshare, Pure, WorkTribe. And we also have participants based in the US, Australia and New Zealand. So moving on, Hannah, were you going to share your screen? For the web page, or yeah, great.
Here we go.
I was thinking I'd completely misunderstood what you were planning, but
No,
that's good. Just to give you a really quick look, I'm just going to briefly talk about the main tabs, and then Hannah's going to go into this in more detail. But we have the report tab. So these reports provide statistics to support the institutional reporting, comparison and benchmarking. Then we've got the visualize tab next to it. So we've got visualizations to kind of offer you that quick and easy way to present usage data. And then the manage tab. So these reports provide information about the data that IRUS holds. And they're kind of to support you with your management of your repository and metadata. So for example, we've got the DOI duplicates report. So this can help you to find items that have duplicate DOIs, and you might want to use it to do some tidying up in your repository. Then there's also the embed tab. So that's where you go to look at the API and widgets, which can So yeah, you find out how to embed them to integrate it integrate IRUS into your own systems. And then right at the end, just to note, there is the service tab. So this has a list of the different services. So like I mentioned, we've got IRUS US. So if you're a institution from the US, that's where you'd change to the different view for the service. I think I'm handing over to you now, Hannah.
Yeah, that's the next step now is that we will do a walkthrough of the reports. So demonstration is those of you who are perhaps new to IRUS or haven't used it in a while or in a different job role and want a bit of a refresher. But I'm sure it will be a good refresher for anyone here today, regardless of your experience with IRUS. So we'll give you a basic overview of how to use the reports, and we'll look at specific examples showing you how to get the data that you need, what the data is showing to you, and how it can be further used. So the first report we'll have a look at is the custom platform master report. So this report is used to show you the usage data at the repository level. So where you see the word platform in IRUS, this basically means repository. So when running this report, you can get stats according to different parameters. So you might want to look at stats for a certain date range, or you might want to select a specific item type. And you can also look at various metrics for the reporting. So for example, you might want to have a look at the total number of investigations or requests, or alternatively, you can look at the unique number of the investigations, or you can look at it all together and look at every interaction with the repository. So what we'll do now is we'll run through a couple of case examples, putting the information into the report and showing you what you can expect to see. So the first case we'll look at is you want to know at your repository how many total item requests there have been in your repository for articles during 2024. So we'll fill out the form and in the report to show you how to get that data. So you put your institution in first, and then when you add your institution, it brings up repositories within your institution. So it may be you see multiple repositories. It could be that this is because you have more than one repository collecting IRUS stats, or maybe you have an inactive repository because you've changed your repository at some point. So you may see more than one, or you may just see the one. But at this stage, you want to select the repository that you're interested in looking at the stats for. So we're going to put a date range in. So we wanted to look at 2024 so far. So I'm going to change the date range there. So the start date will be January 2024. And we're going to collect up to May 2024, which is as far as we go in. Items per page, you can select how many items you want to see on a page. We're just going to leave that as the standard default here. And then further down in our filters, we want to look at the item type. So we said we wanted to look at articles during 2024. So I'm going to select article here. You can select any number of item types here, or you can select them all, depending on what you're looking at. And then for the metric type here, we wanted to know what the total item requests were. So we're going to select that option. And again, here you could select all or one or two, depending on what you're after. So once you've put in all that data, all those parameters, the next step is for you to select Generate Report. So when you've done that, it shows you in a little box what options you've put in, so what data is being pulled out. And then at the bottom here, you have your report. So what is this showing? Well, it shows which repository you're looking at and what metric type you've selected. And then you have the numbers for that period. So the first column we see is the reporting period total. So within those parameters, how many total item requests there were for that period. And then it breaks it down by month so that you can see each month how many there were. So with this report, as with all the other reports, you can export this. So you can export it into a CSV, a TSV, or a JSON file. I won't export it just now because I don't want it to take forever to run. So that's what you can see from that report. We'll have a look at another case, platform master report as well, just so we can see two different cases and compare those. So this time we're going to look at the same repository, and this time we're going to select a different period. So we want to know how many unique item investigations there were, but for books and book sections during a whole year, so for 2023. And we not only want what this was for our own repository, but we want to also include a couple of benchmarking groups as well. So we wanted to add a couple of other repositories in. So when you fill out the form, under institutions, you can select up to 5 institutions here. So if you want to look further than just your own, you can add them in. So we'll just pick a couple of additional institutions and add them in here. And you may see that there are more than one repository for each institution. So just select the ones that you're interested in. Again, here we can change our parameters for our dates. So we want to look at a whole year. So we'll update those dates. This time we wanted to look at books and book sections. So I'm going to update the item type there. So select the ones I'm interested in and deselect the previous. And we were going to look at unique item investigations this time. So we're going to select that metric. And again, update report. So the selection there, it tells you again which parameters you've selected. And then you have the breakdown of those stats in the table at the bottom. So again, it's broken down by the repository, so you can see which it refers to. You have that total number first for the repository for that period. And then again, it's broken down into the different months. You might notice here that you can see a number of zeros for a repository. That could be because the repository wasn't active at that period. So in this case, for this repository, the zeros there are indicating that the repository wasn't active. It hadn't been launched at that stage, which could explain to you why the numbers are very different. Again, you can export this information, so you can perhaps put it into an Excel sheet so that you can then manipulate that data or sort that data to do your own analysis on that. Then at the platform report. So this report shows you that total usage for your repository. And when you run it, by having that breakdown into months, it helps you to analyze those trends. That can sometimes help you when you know there's been a high number of new items during a certain month. You can correlate that information with that. It's also a really good way of demonstrating the value of your repository and the growth usage. And you can also clearly see which months users are more active in your repository. Also, by having that ability to include those other groups, it helps you to compare your usage in your repository with other institutions. So that's the custom report. What we'll do is we'll move on to the combined R4I report. If you do have questions at any point, please pop them into the Q&A section and we will pick all these up at the end. So, combined R4, R5 report. So this report is used to show the usage data again at the repository level, and it does work in a similar way to the custom platform master report. The difference with this report is that it allows you to include historical data, and the only metric that it displays is the total item requests. So the data was, excuse me one second, frog in my throat. The data was previously collected in the R4 service, which ran between July 2012 and December 2019. So in this report, you can pick your date range that can include dates pre-post 2020. So again, what we'll do here is we'll run through a case example to see what you can expect to see using this report. So the case we're going to look at is that we want to see how many requests there have been over a 10-year period for our repository. And we also want to see whether requests for a specific month increased during this time. So we're going to select a repository and make sure the repository is selected in the next box. And then we want to put our dates. So we're going to do that 10-year period. So we'll start with January 2013 and take it to the end of 2023. And then we don't have any further metrics to select here because it is just looking at the total item requests at this stage. So select generate report. Again, we have that selection so you can clearly see what you're looking at. And then we have the overview in this bottom table. So again, it clearly demonstrates the platform, the repository you're looking at, and the metric type, the report that you've run. So we have that total number first. So over that period, how many total item requests made? That's the first number you see. And then if we scroll along the table, again, we can see that this has been broken down into months. Again, the zeros indicate perhaps where the repository wasn't active at that stage. And then afterwards, we can see the numbers for each month. As we scroll through this report and get further through time, you can see the numbers are gradually going up. So that helps you when you want to demonstrate your usage of your repository. If you can show that upwards trend, you can see how many people are engaging with your repository. If I just scroll along to the end of 2019, here we have a clarity over what report is being used. So you can see here that these months prior to 2020 were the R4 reporting, and then following that is where the change occurred into the R5 numbers. So again, you can export this report. If you were looking to see a certain month and how each month over the years had usage, it's good to export it to an Excel sheet, and then you can manipulate that data, filter it and sort it at place. So why would you use this report? What would you see in it? So you can use this to show the total usage for your repository over the complete life of the repository. It also, by having that breakdown again into months, you have those trends there. Again, can relate to the amount of items in your repository. So for example, the further back in time you go where there are fewer items in your repository, you may see that the numbers are smaller. But as your repository has grown and there are more and more items, that number increasing. So it's a really good way to, again, to show the value of your repository. Okay, so that's those first two reports that are dealing with the repository as a whole and their overall usage stats. So what we want to look at now is to look at statistics for more individual items. So the next report in our list is the custom item master report. So we'll select this one. So this report is used to show you usage data for individual items. So again, you have the options to select different parameters, including your date range, the type of item you want to look at. The report then shows you a list of individual items within those parameters that have been accessed in your report during the period of time you've selected, and it gives you the individual stats for each of those items. Now, when you select your parameters and your date range, if an item in your repository hasn't been accessed during that date range, it won't appear in the report. It's not missing, it's just it doesn't return 0 access. So what we'll do is, again, we'll run through a couple of key examples just to show you how to use this form and what you would expect to see when you're using it. So for the first example, we want to know which articles in our repository have had the most total item requests during 2024 so far. I not only want to know the total for each month, but which items have had the most overall requests. As with the other forms, we want to fill in each section. So we're going to add our institution, select our relevant repository, and then add our date parameters. So I'm going 2024 so far. The item type we want to look at in this case is article. Again, though, I could select a different item type, more than one item type, or if I wanted to, I could select all of the items. We're going to have a look at the metrics. So in this case, we wanted to look at the total item requests. Again, you can select any number of metric types there. In this report, we also have an optional columns to include section. So it might be that you want a little bit further information on screen as to what is the item metadata. So for example, you might want to see the list of authors there, or you might want to see. In this example, I want to have a look at the DOI as an identifier for the item, and also the URI so that I know I can link to it in the repository. So I'm going to include those optional columns. And then when I've selected all those parameters, I'm going to generate the report. So again, we have that overview of what we've selected and what we're seeing in our report, and have the list of items. So the report is going to display all the individual items that have been accessed during that selected period. And it puts them into order of the most accessed to the least accessed during that total time period. So if I scroll along this table here, here we have the reported total, and it's sorted these items by the most accessed. So you can see during that period, you have that order there. Again, you have that total number, and then it's broken down by month. So you may see a 0 here. That may indicate that it wasn't in the repository at that stage, but have the numbers for each month afterwards. Again, this is another report you can export into Excel if you want to do further work into it and to filter that data. If I scroll back to the start of this table, you can see optional columns there that we selected. So the DOI is that identifier that can help you quickly identify that it's the correct article, and your URI there is a link to the item in the repository. So these columns here aren't clickable links, but you can take that information and pop it into the browser and access it that way. Clickable links, though, are the titles. So you can see here these are in blue, and when you hover over them, you get the hand icon. So if you click on, it takes you into report, which is the individual item report, which we will look at next. But it's an easy way of clicking into further information. So that's one way to use it. Let's have a look at another example. This time, I want to know which books or book sections have had the most total item investors just for a 1 month period. So I'm going to add my institution again and my date period. So we're going to change this to select just 1 month this time. And for item type, we're going to select book and book section because that's the item we want to see. This time we're going to have a look at the amount of total investigations that there were for that item, for these items. And this time I'm not going to include DOI and URI. I will include the authors. And then update report. So here you can see there's a lot fewer items for this period because we're looking at a smaller period of time. And the table then is shown in the same way. Item, your optional columns, so we have the names of the authors for these items, the type it is, so we can see clearly whether it was a book or just a section. And then we have the stats that we want to see. So again, sorted by the most access during that period. And in this case, we have it broken down into months, but we were only looking at a 1 month period. So those numbers will be the same. The titles for the item are clickable links if you want to look at it in further detail. So how are these reports useful to you? Well, it allows you to look at those trends, but for just individual items rather than a whole repository. So this might be useful in helping you to track the impact of an item or how much it's being accessed. When you use that wide period of months, it can help to see whether the usage could be related to an event. So for example, when the item has been first added to a repository, or it may be that the item has been mentioned at an event or in a news item, and you can perhaps marry up the stats to those events and see where that usage is coming from. So that's one way of looking at your individual items. So as mentioned, when you click on the title, it takes you into the individual item report. So what we do is look at it in more detail. So you can either access it through this report when you've run this report and you're looking at a specific item, or you can access it directly from the menu when you have an item in mind that you want to use. So again, as with all the reports, you have some parameters to some information. So this report is going to be used to show you that specific usage data for one item. So you'll need, if you're using this report fresh straight from the menu, not clicking into it another way, you're going to need an ID for the item. So this could be a DOI, the IRUS ID, or an OAI ID. So the report will show you how that item has been assessed. And you can look at this either on a monthly basis, or you do also have the option to look at this on a daily basis. And if you do choose the daily basis option, that's just for a period of the past 2 months. So again, we'll run through some examples to show what you can see when you use this report. So I have an item in mind and I want to know how many requests there have been for this article. And I want to know this on a monthly basis. I want to see the usage across all the repositories this item is in, and not just the repository at the institution I work at. So I'm going to put the DOI in, and I wanted to look at the unique item requests. So I'm going to select that on a monthly basis. So and select generate report. So the first thing we see here in this table is an overview for the item. And at the top of the table, it shows a number of items too, and you have the option to click show details for all items. So for this, expands the table, and that shows to me that this item is appearing in 2 repositories. And we can see the metadata here for both of those repositories. So it includes the metadata for the authors, the type, the DOI, and also here we have that clickable link that will take me to the item within those repositories. We also have included some additional metrics here from digital metrics, which you can look at when you're considering the statistics for an item as a whole. So if we scroll down to the table, initially the table will combine all the usage into one reporting line. But if you click the plus button, it will divide the usage into each repository. So again, as we've seen previously, we start off with the period total. So for that period, how many unique item requests there were, and then it breaks it down by a monthly basis. We could also have the option here to show a breakdown by country. It can show you which country that access has originated in. So if you are doing a really deep delve into the stats and usage, you do have that option available to you as well, and that comes up as part of this report. So there we can see if you want to have that combination of all the repositories, you have that option here. But just to note that the repository needs to be an IRUS participant to see that. So that's one usage for this report. So we'll have a look at a second example. So in this case, an academic has recently had an article published and added it straight to the repository. And you want to see what that initial interaction with the article has been. So we want to look at the total item investigations on a daily basis. We want to see if that is more than just our home repository. We want to see across multiple repositories. So using the ID for the item. So again, I'm going to use a DOI. I wanted to see the total item investigations, and I'm going to select daily, which will give me that 2-month period. Here, or if you're doing that fresh, you'd select generate report. So again, we have the overview box, and if I expand that by clicking on show details, I can see that this report appeared in 2 separate repositories. And again, I have that metadata for those repositories. And then underneath there, we can see that the stats are included for that 2-month period. So again, starting off with, we have that total number, and then we can see by each day what the stats were. So it may be that you want to see if there was any initial accessing of a report when it was first added. So you would use this report to do that. So that's our individual item report. It's good to see that interaction and also to see over other repositories as well, where the access is coming from. Okay, so we'll move on to our final report for today, which is our item statistics by ORCID report. So this report allows you to use an ORCID ID to see what stats IRUS is collecting for publications that are linked to that ORCID. So it's really allowing you to look at an individual and see what's in the repository for them. Again, it doesn't only include items from your own institution's repository, but from all the IRUS participating repositories. And that is provided, though, that the ORCID for that person has recorded in the metadata for the item. So to ensure this report is always kept up to date, when you're adding items to your repository, make sure to include the ORCID where you have it, and then that ensures that this report will include that item. So let's have a look at an example. So I'm going to use an ORCID, and that's all you need to do here is just include the ORCID ID. You can have the option to select the items per page and then generate report. So again, an overview here. So this confirms who the author is, and then it gives you that link to the ORCID profile. So you can click on that and it will take you out to the ORCID profile. It also shows you here how many items are in IRUS participating repositories. So just to note, this is individual items and not unique items. So where one item is appearing in multiple repositories, each occurrence will be counted. So down to our table here. So again, we have the list of items, this time in A to Z order. Our title is a clickable link, which takes you again back into that individual item. So if you need to delve a bit deeper and get a bit further information, you can do that this way. So where you see an item appearing in multiple repositories at the same institution. So for example, this item here, I can see that it appears in 2 repositories at Keele. And that's because the institution has an active and an inactive repository. Using one repository and then they swapped to use a different repository, but I can see the stats for both repositories, and that would allow me to combine that information so that I've got an overall idea of engagement for that item. As I scroll through the list, take on to another page, I can see some items. For this item here, different repositories. So it allows me then to combine those numbers so I get a further, more overall view of engagement across the different repositories, more than just the repository that I work in. Again, we have the breakdown of the information. So we have the item, the authors. It clearly shows you which it is sitting in, and it also highlights to you which metric type it is counting there. So it's our unique item requests. So what do you see in this report? Well, you might run this report and you notice that there are outputs missing from this list for a specific person. So this could be for a number of reasons. It could be because it is not appearing in a repository, or it is in the repository, but the ORCID hasn't been included. You might add an ORCID ID in here and return no results. The list may be empty, and that might be because the ORCID ID has never been included in the repository metadata. So using this report, you get an overview of which of those items have an ORCID included, which allows you then to spot the gaps, and then you can take the steps needed just to enrich the metadata. You can use this report also to give an overview of engagement with a given paper, and then you have that quick and easy clickable link through to that individual item report. So it helps really to see that wider picture of engagement across the country, especially perhaps if the academic you are looking at has been a co-author on papers or the lead author. It may be that the item has been sat in another repository for much longer, or it may only be appearing in another institution's repository. So it allows you to still be able to access that usage statistic. And this also can help with your ref impact when you're considering that. If the numbers are low in your own repository, it may be by using this report, you can see that they're much higher in another repository, the impact of that item. And also in terms of ref and open access, this report can help you with your compliance with the open access policy, as it may be the case that you've not been able to make this open in your own repository, but by running this report, you can see that it's been uploaded elsewhere into another repository. So that's our overview for the reports, and I hope that's been helpful in helping you to see the basic steps for using the reports, how you actually get the data out of the reports, and what you can use them for. So just things to remember is that your reports can always be exported. That can be done in CSV, which allows you to filter and manipulate the data. There's also the option for JSON format. So if you have that ability, you can allow your data to engage with other systems. It helps you really demonstrate that engagement with your research. It shows you how much usage your repository is getting. It shows you how many people are accessing that research in your institution. And it allows you to see those trends of growth of your repository, or the times of year that your repository is more accessed. So you may run a report and see that October and November you have loads of access and usage, whereas over the summer it might be a little quieter. So it helps you to see that and helps with the understanding of why that's happening. It can help with your ref impact, to show how an item has been accessed, especially maybe during certain time periods or where there's been additional interest in an item. And it also helps the growth of interest in an item over a time period. And it can just really be used to demonstrate the value of your repository. So overall, IRUS can really help you to show to others why your repository is needed, why it's a crucial part of your research infrastructure, and how it is being used. So that's that part of today. And I'm going to pass back over to Alice now to wrap up some support.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, so before we get to questions, we just wanted to point out a couple of areas on the website that you can go to for more information and support. So at the top, in the About section, as well as service descriptions and policies and the list of participants, there's also a collection of use cases and some really interesting case studies that we've gathered from users that you might find helpful getting started. There's also the support section. Yep, so in that section we've got the FAQs and a glossary that can help you to remember all of the different terms that are floating around. And there's also the webinar recordings are kept there, and loads of helpful guides that can help you get started, but also serve as just reminders when you're dipping in and out of the service. Yeah, there's the update section as well. So if we have any announcements, we'll record them there, as well as sending them out in the GIS mail list. And then in Participate, you can find out more information about joining, or there's also information about implementing the tracker and maintaining. So letting us know if anything's changed on your end, so we can keep it a smooth service. I think that's everything. Are we going to questions now, Hannah? Is that right?
Yes. So
Laura's up.
Yes. Right. Let's see. we have some questions in the Q&A. Sorry, I couldn't see these while I was doing that. So does anybody have, before I get to the Q&A questions that have been included, does anybody have any questions they want to ask live in the room? I'm not sure if you have the ability to put your hand up, actually. Oh, yes, you do. So if you do have a question you want to ask live in the room, please feel free to pop your hand up and we can speak. So somebody has asked if you have any if we have any documentation that summarizes the type of reports that the system offers. So yeah, as Alice has just mentioned, we have the guides and we have the FAQs and glossaries. So the FAQs go through different ways of using the system. The glossary helps you to define the different terms used in the system, which might help you to know which report is best for you to run. Are institutions able to tweak the colours of the graphs in the visualizations? As far as I'm aware, you are unable to do that. They are set colours in the visualization. But yeah, if you yeah, I don't, if anybody has any other information, Laura or Dave, if you know of that, I'm not sure that you can change those colours.
No. No,
Good.
not at the moment. There's only the one visualization there at present anyway, but yeah, it's tucked away within Tableau.
That's fine. I thought that might be the case. Okay, so I go to our Q&A. There we go. Right. So for item type, does this depend on how the repository has effectively tagged their data? So for example, I was comparing the number of chemical structures added over a few months for 2 repositories and was surprised one of them didn't have any. The message was error, no usage available. Maybe chemical structures aren't classed. So Laura, do you have an answer? I see you said you can answer that question live.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can have a stab at this. So to answer your question, yes, it does depend on how the repository has flagged the data in their own system. So the next webinar will go into this, I think it goes into this a bit more detail, but we're looking at item type mapping. So we map to a consistent set of item types, but it is dependent on how the original repository marks something up, and we make a guess on how we map it to the new, to our item types. And I can share a link to more information about that. Specific question around chemical structures in the Oxford University Research Archive. If anyone from Oxford University Research Archive is on the call, maybe they can provide a bit of detail on whether they have chemical structures in their repository. I think we probably need to investigate that on a per repository basis, but hopefully that answers your question.
Just to add to that, Laura, I've had a peek in the metadata that we have, and because chemical structures was, we expanded our controlled list of item types back in about 2 years ago, I believe, and it's only Cambridge University's Apollo repository that actually uses chemical structures at the moment. So maybe a kick for somebody else if they want to, if they've got some chemical structures. But yes, we can only deal with whatever metadata is actually provided in the individual repositories.
Brilliant, thank you. I hope that's answered your question. The next question is, if you don't have a DOI, how do you find the IRUS or OAI ID, please? So for the IRUS ID, if you run the individual items, the custom item master report, and then from that report you click into an item which takes you to the individual item report, you can get the IRUS ID that way. It will bring that up in that report. Does anybody else have any information to share on that question? Brilliant. How frequently are the stats in IRUS updated? Is it monthly? Yes, they're updated on a monthly basis. So at the beginning of June, the stats for May would become available, and so on.
So just to add to that one as well, since you've shown daily stats, what we do is process stats provisionally on a daily basis, so we can show them as Hannah demonstrated on the individual item report, but the canonical granularity is for counter is monthly, so they're the de facto stats.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question for the team is, for the ORCID report, if an article was added in January without an ORCID, but an ORCID was added in March, if I ran the report today, would it report usage statistics for that article starting from January or March?
Yes. He says. What we implemented, I think this is going back 2 years as well, when we changed the IRUS type mapping policy. We actually looked at incrementally harvesting from repositories. So in the past, we just, when an item was first seen, we'd go and get the metadata, and that was it. That's all we used. But now we incrementally harvest. So every week we'll go back to each individual repository and basically ask them if anything's changed, and if it has, then we'll scrape that data again. So if an ORCID's been added into the metadata for a particular item, then we should pick that up.
Thank you very much, Dave.
I will have to check if it does actually go for ORCIDs, because ORCIDs are a particular case. It's something we added in. There isn't, apart from if you use the REOX format of metadata, that ORCIDs aren't in a specific place. So we have to hunt high and low for them. So we may not always pick them up, but we do our best.
Brill, thank you. And then our last question in the Q&A is, can you say how data sets are being indexed from repositories? For example, if there are multiple files displayed in a repository page, is this recorded as one request investigation per file?
Okay, you can see me thinking there. We have had this question before, and I'm trying to remember what we investigated and what we came up with the answers. I believe it's counted as one request per file, but it might be deduplicated with the unique item because we map it, so we count it as a single item. But if you download multiple files, I think it counts as unique as total item request, but counts as one unique item request. Dave, I don't know if you had any further information on that. Might need to look into that and give a definitive answer.
I think it depends on how we see the item. So if the individual file is the item, then that would be recorded separately to the repository page, I think. Yeah, I think we need to investigate that a bit more, but yeah, because there is a relationship of items and components and parents within the counter standard. So yeah, it depends on what we've actually been provided by the repository in terms of the messages we get via the tracker protocol.
Yeah. If you could send us an example to the help desk, we can look it up.
Right, I think that's it for questions. So I'll just finish off with highlighting.
Hannah, I think there was some in the chat as well. Did we cover all of those off? I think we might have covered them, but just double check.
There's one further one that I missed. So is there a possibility to merge duplicates coming from different repositories into one entry and sum up download numbers? For now, it's done in Excel manually, but it would be grateful if there's any tips on how to do that.
If you run might need to dig into that one a little bit further. So if you run the item report and don't ask for it to be broken down, I think it does it break down by repository, doesn't it? There is, I think in the individual item report, it will default to a single number, and then you have the option to expand it out. But I think possibly you're talking about it for multiple items at the same time, in which case we need to think about that.
I've made a note of the question, and we can have a investigation return to that one. I noticed there is a hand up as well, so I will allow Robert. You can speak. You should be able to unmute.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you. At Salford, we're trying to get our heads around. There's a disparity between the stats shown on our repository work tribe and those showing on IRUS, and we think it's probably to do with the differences in how the data's treated by work tribe and IRUS. And I know you've got published information on how robots are excluded and things like this. I just wondered, do all the different repository providers give you all of their data, or is it sort of been pre-filtered by them beforehand? So I'm not really sure what work tribe do to the data that you don't do.
Okay. So we are thinking about doing some additional, I think Hannah's been doing some additional investigation to see if we can understand like how other providers process the data. What I would say is the data that work tribe process will be it's managed separately to our data. So they will have a stream, all repositories will be sending us raw data. So when an event happens, we learn about it. In some cases, they will filter out the counter robots, so that there's a list of known robots out there. In some cases, they will filter that out before sending it to us. And again, this is something you could probably pick up in more detail in the next session. And you can see how, for some repositories, those counter robots will be filtered out before they've sent to us. That's one difference between some repositories. We will filter that out anyway. But yeah, I think it's best to think about it as they will probably have a completely different way of collecting, processing, and maintaining their repository stats. It's not like they said we work on the same set of stats, if that makes sense, and process them in different ways. They will probably have a different methodology for capturing usage.
Yeah.
Does that help?
And yeah, we process over a bigger pool as well. So if work tribe are producing stats for Salford, they're probably just using Salford's usage to do whatever they want to do that. Whereas one of the bonuses of IRUS is that we look across the entire picture, so the more the merrier, as it were. So it's a global picture. So we, as Laura says, there's a standard list that Counter maintain of known robots, but we use experience from so many years and sort of empirical evidence of other usage. So we have different thresholds for, so we're looking at IP user agent combinations across all repositories that participate. So we can look and see in a given time period if there's a heavy usage across lots of repositories, then it's likely to be robotic use rather than individual user usage. So yeah, there'll be significant differences in the processing, and that's the sort of raison d'etre of IRUS, was to get this standardized view, because I know DSpace produce stats and ePrints and they're all slightly different, and Google will do stuff differently as well because they're only looking at a subsection. So I think the gist is use IRUS.
Great.
Or use both
for a
of
bit
them.
of self-promotion.
Well, that's one way to finish off this morning. So thank you everybody for taking the time to come today, and I hope that's been useful to you. We'll put this recording up in the next couple of weeks. We also have part 2 of this series in 2 weeks' time, looking at the reports that delve into your metadata a little more. So I hope to see some of you there, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
And just
Thank
final
you.
thing to note, if you have any questions, just contact JISC at help@jisc.ac.uk and mention IRUS in the subject line. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.